If you apply this to a very difficult topic of Israel and Palestine,
Speaking of which, right?
you have been critical of the policies of the state of Israel,
Mhm.
but as we've mentioned, very supportive of Jewish people. You have a lot of friends, rabbis, and um, Jews in general here in Dallas and across the world. What is the difference to you in that part of the world between politics and religion? So in this case, Zionism and Judaism, both terms broadly defined.
Both terms broadly defined.
So I say that because those terms, there's technical definitions and there's how they're popularly used. And so you have to be kind of,
Sure.
just like we said with Islamophobia, these terms they become politicized. So just generally speaking, I think Zionism has to do with politics, and Judaism has to do with the
Yeah,
religion.
it's the great complexity, like to a lot of people, like, wait a minute, right? And you got to take a step back and wonder why there are so many Zionist anti-Semites in America. And there are so many anti-Zionists who are far from being anti-Semites, anti-Zionism, that are opposed to the ideology, that are opposed to the implications of it. Look, I think that it's fundamentally secular. When you think about it, there is an ethno-supremacism. There is, I am the child of Palestinians that were forcibly displaced from their land. I've never been able to go to where my grandparents are from. I've never been able to see that land. I've never been able to access that. I have cousins that I'll never be, well, I shouldn't say never. Inshallah, God willing, I will meet them, but that I've only been able to speak through a phone, FaceTime, Zoom. I think that it's important for us to separate criticism of Israel's policies from anti Semitism. In fact, it's an injustice. It cheapens anti Semitism when you throw every person who is opposed to Zionism or opposed to Israel's policies in the bucket of being anti Semites. It's wrong. It cheapens it. It doesn't do justice to it. And I think it's important for us to have a meaningful conversation about America's support for Israel. Listen, there are terms that are important here. So I'm going to throw out these big terms, right? Apartheid, occupation, ethnic cleansing. These are terms that are legal terms. There are objective thresholds here for apartheid, occupation, ethnic cleansing. The threshold of apartheid has been crossed according to the most respectable human rights organizations in the world. These are the organizations that you will champion and that you will use in every single other conflict to justify your own policies. But that threshold of apartheid has been passed. According to Human Rights Watch, according to Amnesty International, according to the Harvard Law Review, the threshold of apartheid has been crossed. There's a legal terminology there. Two sets of laws for two separate people. You have a displaced people that are forcibly being removed, that are being treated differently, that are stateless, that are undergoing daily humiliation, that live behind an apartheid wall, that live under a different set of policies, that are routinely bombarded, that have lost their ability to free movement, that have lost their ability to access to basic necessities of human life. There are legal definitions here. I don't see how any objective human being can read those reports on apartheid and the threshold crossed for apartheid and walk away from that and say that this is just Jews and Muslims that don't like each other. There's a legal definition here. Occupation. When Israel was created in 1948, you will find many Jews who are opposed to Zionism. And I think this is important, to talk to Jews who are opposed to Zionism, and they are many, that will say that we were told that it was a land without a people for a people without a land. The problem with that was there were people there. Our ancestors, 750,000 Palestinians expelled in the Nakba, and many Palestinians that have been removed and harassed and that are treated in horrific ways. And the occupation is expanding. It is an illegal occupation. The settlements are still expanding. And the United States enables that occupation with its funding, with its unconditional support, unwavering support of Israel. And it does so in a way that completely undermines any of its claims to being a beacon of freedom in the world. Because it is in plain sight now that the world can see what is happening in Sheikh Jarrah, what is happening in Jerusalem, what is happening with these expanding settlements, everything that flies in the face of any claim to wanting a peaceful solution. The children in Gaza, when I talk about dehumanization, the children that were on the face of the New York Times, which is historically one of the most anti-Palestinian newspapers in America, the faces of the children of Gaza. America and many parts of the world are now seeing it. We have been saying for a very long time, this is apartheid. This is an occupation. This is an injustice. The world needs to check it, hold it accountable. South Africa, which experienced apartheid, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, all of those that fought apartheid in South Africa said that Palestinians are living under apartheid and that the same strategies that checked apartheid in South Africa need to be used to hold Israel accountable for apartheid with the Palestinians. It's impossible for us as Palestinians to simply say that we should give up on this cause because all the odds are stacked against us. But when you have, videos coming out of the Israeli army, spewing skunk water, sewage water on worshipers leaving Al-Aqsa, far-right leaders now taking the government and the so-called only democracy in the Middle East, prohibiting a Palestinian flag being raised anywhere around. American reporters, Shireen Abu Akleh, Palestinian-American Christian reporter, Palestinian-American Christian reporter, one of the most prominent journalists in the Middle East, shot in the face, plain sight. And all the American government could say was, if it turns out that it's indeed Israel, that Israel is responsible for the death of an American journalist, then we will hold them accountable. Nothing. Not a peep. It was a shame to see that happen, and it just solidified to us that whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, unfortunately, the support for Israel is enabling it to continue to wipe out the Palestinian population from its historic land. And so we see that happening. And I'll say this as well. People ask me about the Abraham Accords. They say, you are talking about you're talking about peace between communities of faith and protecting communities of faith. Why are you opposed to the Abraham Accords? I think that the name of Abraham should not be used. And I wrote an article called Why I Oppose the Abraham Accords. The name of Abraham should not be used to justify arms deals that only further disenfranchise the abused population of the Palestinians, where, you have quote unquote Muslim regimes making peace with Israel, and that's being used against the Palestinian people who are only further disenfranchised from having a voice in their own fate for the sake of American arms deals and security and economic benefits. It's despicable. It's repulsive. Talk to the people, speak to people on the ground there, see what's happening with your own two eyes, and think about the injustice where our taxpayer dollars are being used to suppress a people in what legally meets the definition by every objective standard of apartheid, of occupation, of ethnic cleansing. And it's ongoing and it's happening in real time, and it's becoming more blatant with a regime now that's unapologetic of even expressing what the policies have already done. And that is the removal of a people, forcible removal of a people, because the government knows that the United States support is unconditional.
Do you have hope that Jews, Muslims, and Christians on this land will live in peace one day together and with basic respect for each other's humanity?
Look, this isn't a religious conflict. I think that's fundamentally one of the problems.
So even the question is not the correct question?
It's not the correct question. This is not a religious conflict. Yes, religion is invoked. Yes, there are religious elements. But there are many Jews that are opposed to what is happening right now towards the Palestinians, many. And I would recommend, a serious discussion with even people whose perspectives have grown. Peter Beinart being an example, Rabbi Simon Zimmerman, who started If Not Now, Beit Islam, an Israeli human rights organization that also classed it as apartheid recently. There are many Jews that are opposed to what is happening right now. Palestinians are also not exclusively a Muslim population. Shireen Abu Akleh was Christian. There are many Palestinian Christians that are also being denied entry into their historic churches and that are completely bewildered or absolutely lost in regards to why American evangelicals have this ironclad support for the occupation and have ignored the plight of Palestinian Christians. Of course, I believe Muslims, Christians, and Jews can coexist. Of course, I have hope, because I have to have hope as a person of faith. But as much hope as I have, I think there's a great sense of urgency for people to open their eyes, learn what's actually happening on the ground, read the reports. Stop letting these commentators and these companies that are able to generate propaganda own the narrative. There are objective standards here. There are objective measures of oppression that need to be considered here. What's happening to Gaza is one of the greatest atrocities of our time. Learn about it, right? I'd tell people to just watch the Vice documentaries, for example, the mini documentaries. I'd sent them to you as well, Inside the Battle for Jerusalem. I mean, think about it. A guy from Long Island, New York, can fly to Israel, right? Fly into Tel Aviv and walk into a home that's been occupied by families for generations and throw the people out under the full protection of the military there and spit on them. Historic homes. And when people come up to me and say, we're opposed to Islamophobia, but they support that, I tell you, you're not opposed to Islamophobia. How can you be opposed to Islamophobia when you traffic in the same framings and dehumanization that enables the viciousness towards Muslims here and Palestinians over there, that they do not deserve to be treated like equal human beings, like full human beings? And that based on historic claims, a guy can fly from New York into a historic neighborhood in Jerusalem and kick out generational families with military guns next to them. What does that sound like? How's that normal, right? And so I think that if people take the time to read, people take the time to investigate, then they come to this conclusion themselves that this is unacceptable. And that you can't put, and this is one of the problems with the framing of Israel-Palestine, is that you're equating occupier and occupied. You're equating the two sides of the conflict. And it's not a conflict, it's an occupation. There is such a disparity of power here that you cannot equate the two sides. You can't, Malcolm X would say you clip the bird's wing and then fly and then blame it for not flying as high as you do. You can't do that to a people and just equate them with their occupier. It's an atrocity. It requires us to challenge it. And I'm hopeful at the current movement of Muslims, Christians, and Jews and people of all faiths that are saying enough is enough, that thresholds have been crossed here, that this is an atrocity that cannot continue. This is very personal to me because this is happening now. What I anticipate, and this is what America did, this is what Nelson Mandela actually predicted with the United States. What I anticipate is that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, every American will say, how could we have supported this? And this was terrible. And will pay symbolic, homage to the Palestinian cause. But there are people now that are clinging on for dear life, access to their places of worship, access to their generational homes. Right now, at this there are children that are in detention, and there's a bill in Congress to just stop. I mean, wherever you stand on this issue, child detention should be a red line, right? Congresswoman Betty McCollum has put this bill on the floor of Congress. She can't even get that passed, right? Just to at least censure child detainment by the IDF. So people need to look into this deeper. They need to consider the human element of this and consider the urgency of it as well. With this new regime, it's only going to unfortunately get much worse in the immediate term, and so we have to do something about it.